So I do want to start with what's happening here with the Democrats around Israel. So I don't know. I know everybody that's watching is not on Twitter, but I just want to show everyone what's been making the rounds from some of these Democrat politicians on Twitter. Now, all of a sudden, Hillary Clinton comes out and says aid organizations report that thousands of children in Gaza are at risk of starvation while trucks full of food sit waiting across the border. The full flow of humanitarian assistance must be restored immediately. And she's not the only one. Barack Obama, while a lasting resolution to the crisis in Gaza must involve a return of all hostages and a cessation of Israel's military operations, these articles underscore the immediate need for action to be taken to prevent the travesty of innocent people dying of preventable starvation. So again, neither one of them said anything about this under the Biden administration when he was president, but I also think it is pretty insulting of Barack Obama to stand here and to mention the hostages first, given that there's a genocide that is happening in Gaza. And notice something else, Max. They're mentioning the starvation crisis, but they're not saying anything about Israel, IDF soldiers killing people as they go to receive food. What is happening here? Why is it that now all of a sudden Obama, Hillary Clinton, Cory Booker's on the floor looking like a fool right now, as well as Hakeem Jeffries? Why is it all of a sudden now they pretend to care about what's happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza?
Yeah, also Amy Klobuchar, Senator Amy Klobuchar gave a floor speech for like 7 minutes about the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and touting all of the measures that she had supported to get aid in. The Jewish Democratic Coalition has called for aid to get in. Cory Booker said the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not working, but none of them will name the perpetrator. And none of them will tell you what we need to do to apply serious pressure to Israel to force them to stop the killing and stop the starvation. They don't lay out any measures that need to be taken. Another figure I should mention also is Wesley Bell from St. Louis has criticized Israel for blocking aid to the Gaza Strip. Wesley Bell was basically inserted into Congress. Like AIPAC took a $12 million syringe and just injected him into Congress in order to get Cori Bush out, the troublesome Cori Bush. He's just an AIPAC lackey. So even AIPAC's biggest stooges are going off the reservation. Amy Klobuchar, Cory Booker, they posed for a photo with Netanyahu like 2 weeks ago when he made his 4th trip to Washington, like the landlord coming to collect his rent. They all had to pose with him. And now they're turning around and de facto accusing him of imposing starvation on an entire population. We haven't seen this before. Hillary Clinton, referred to correctly by Tulsi Gabbard as the queen of all warmongers, who denounced ceasefire calls again and again and again, called her own students who protested her uninformed and ignorant about the conflict, called all protesters ignoramuses, when we were trying to tell her what Israel was planning to do, which is exactly what she wound up being forced to condemn, which is the final solution. We said this was a genocide in the making. Actually, on October 10th, 2023, I went to the State Department and questioned Matt Miller, then the spokesman, about calls from high-level allies of Netanyahu to carry out Nakba 2.0. This was just 3 days into the war. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, referring to Palestinians as human animals, calling to cut off gas, food, water. I mean, that was taking place right away. And Matt Miller just shouted at me. He was wagging his finger at me, declaring that, babies had had their heads cut off and all of these atrocities had been committed, and Israel has the right to defend itself, and it will defend itself, and they will support them. And now here we are over 650 days later, and these same characters are now accusing Israel of war crimes, including Matt Miller, who said in an interview, in a podcast interview, that he knew Israel was committing war crimes, but he wasn't allowed to say it because his job was basically to deny them. So why are they doing this? That was your question. I gave kind of a long summary, and I wanted to lay out the hypocrisy, to outline the contradictions. But why are they doing this? Well, aside from the fact that it is convenient because Trump is now in power, we have to consider that they're not actually directing their condemnations against Trump. The Democrats aren't turning this into like a party-wide attack on Trump the way that they're exploiting the Epstein files. But it's convenient. It's possible for them to talk about it now because Trump's in power. I think the reason they're doing it is kind of reputation washing, that liberals, elite liberals, are much more concerned about the judgment of history than the MAGA elite are. They have presidential libraries, like the Obama presidential library is going to cost $800 million. They have boards, they have foundations, the Clinton Foundation, the Obama Foundation. They have, endowed university chairs. They have, they're all jostling for $10 million memoir deals. They really care so much about their legacies. They want statues to be emblazoned with their names and placed in universities and town centers. And they, for about 18 months or 17 months, supported a genocide, cheered on a genocide, and took money from an ethno-supremacist bribery network in order to do so. They were central figures in providing cover for the Biden administration so it could keep rearming Israel with all the 2,000-pound baby buster bombs that it needed in order to perpetuate the Holocaust of our time. It was, until Trump took over, a liberal genocide, but it was these figures who made sure that it didn't end on Biden's watch, and therefore made certain that Trump inherited the genocide. And what did Trump proceed to do? Trump, after getting into office, introduced an AI concocted fantasy of an ethnically cleansed Gaza Riviera, which gave Israel the green light to enact the final solution that we're seeing now. But it's these Democrats that made it possible for Trump to even have the power to do that, because they weren't putting any pressure on Biden to end it. They were denouncing the few people within the party who were putting the pressure on. And they were calling the rest of us anti-Semitic, Hamas-loving idiots, useful idiots. So I see why they're saying what they're saying. But the only thing that I want to hear, the only time I want to hear them talking about Gaza or Palestine is from inside a glass box in a courtroom.
Yeah. I have no patience, and you let me know if you feel like I'm being too harsh. I have absolutely no patience for the ones who sat by for the past 2 years and pointed their fingers at the protesters or called them, anti-Semitic, or refused to acknowledge what Israel was doing. They saw the same videos that we saw on Twitter. Ro Khanna said so himself. He saw all those images over and over again. They saw the same things that we saw. Netanyahu came right to Congress and held up a map and talked about the blessing and the curse and this idea of a greater Israel. It was right in front of their face. And I say this because there are some of us who supported Palestine from the beginning. I know you did too as well, but I supported ending the occupation and the oppression of the Palestinian people long before October 7th. And that was after watching a documentary that was created by Abby Martin that really woke me up to. That was like my awakening, because I didn't realize what was going on over there. And so there are some of us who stood on, defending the Palestinian people and against what Israel was doing from day one. And some of us lost friends. I lost a friend that I had for over 15 years because I took the side of supporting the Palestinian people. And for these Johnny come latelys, and it's not just the politicians, I'm also talking about the people, some of the liberals that I see now that are on social media that were pointing their fingers at us for not voting for a Kamala Harris, or were saying, stop talking about Gaza. I don't care about Gaza. Now, some of these same people are saying, oh my God, look at what's happening to the Palestinian people. I'm sorry. I don't have the patience. I just really don't. I just remember how these people like pointed their fingers at us and mocked us and told us that Gaza wasn't important and just let it go. And now all of a sudden that Trump is president, now all of a sudden they have some type of sympathy for what they're seeing that's happening to these people. So for me, I have no patience for it.
Yeah, I mean, there is yeah, I don't have any patience for it either. And it's interesting how many of the Biden architects of this genocide have actually remained silent, like Samantha Power, who made her career off humanitarian intervention and the need for military intervention to stop famines and genocide being imposed by evil dictators. She's totally silent. She was the USAID director under Biden, who couldn't get US aid into Gaza because Israel was blocking it. Now she's not even taking the opportunity to blame Trump. She's just totally silent. She hangs her head. She may hang her head in shame, or she may just be so also concerned with her reputation that she figures it's best to just not say anything because we're all going to call her out. I mean, they're all getting roasted online. And I think that speaks to another motivation here, which is that the Democrats are reckoning with the fact that their base, and especially people under 40, hate them. They passionately hate them. And they especially hate the pro-Israel Democrats. It goes beyond Palestine and the whole issue of the Gaza genocide. It's about authenticity. If you're siding with Israel at this point, and you're staying silent or you're cheering them on, it means you're just being paid. And so you're a phony and you have no values at all. That's the way the progressive base correctly sees it. They're supporting Mahmoud Mamdani after Andrew Cuomo made the New York City election race, mayoral election, about Israel, when Mamdani wanted to make it about affordability. And that blew back on Cuomo. We're also seeing on the right, Charlie Kirk just getting his ass kicked left and right by the Groypers, by more radical elements in the Republican Party that are disgusted with the Gaza genocide, but also they think America first means Israel doesn't control the U.S. And Charlie Kirk, they can see that he is a vehicle for Israeli influence, and he's also been put up as the lead conservative influencer for youth. And so he's been targeted, and day after day, he just loses cachet among right-wing youth. Marjorie Taylor Greene is kind of sensing which way the wind is blowing on the right, and she is the first Republican member of Congress to call what Israel is doing a genocide. She did so just yesterday and condemned Randy Fine, calls himself the Hebrew Hammer. I call him the Hebrew Heifer, because he was mocking. He's just this clearly gluttonous figure who was mocking the starvation of Gaza and saying, it's fine that they starve. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, only 2 years ago at the beginning of the genocide, led the charge to censor Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian member of Congress, because she was calling it a genocide. That shows how much things are changing, even on the right. And Benjamin Netanyahu's approval rating among Americans, the people that he leads, our true leader, Benjamin Netanyahu's approval rating is actually lower than Trump's. Before October 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu had a net positive approval rating among Americans, largely because of Republicans. But now it's the youth factor. His approval rating, I don't even know if it's double digits among young people in both parties. They hate him because he's the face of the Holocaust of our time. So a terrible reckoning is coming for these people. And some have decided, well, it's better that I speak out now, even though it's too little too late. That's what happened with Obama. Obama was getting shamed. He had done this pathetic podcast interview with Michelle and her brother on that podcast that nobody watches. And the main takeaway was him being like, look, I had a gay professor when I was in college, and I learned a lot from him. And you need to have a gay man be your friend in case you have a what did he say? In case you have a non-binary son, you need to. And he's just going on and on about his gay professor. He never says anything about the Palestinian professors that he knew back in Chicago when he was trying to climb the ranks and seem legit, like Rashid Khalidi, Edward Said, Ali Abu Nima. There's a photo of them all eating dinner together at a benefit for refugees in Dehesha camp outside Bethlehem. He didn't learn anything from them. He threw them all under the bus. And so now he's talking about, his some anonymous gay professor. Well, and then blathering on about ketchup and how people who like ketchup are the best people while millions are starving in Gaza. So, this is all, I tweeted that just to shame him. And then Hillary Clinton, who I always thought was more militaristic than Obama, is the first one to speak out. So Obama just had to say something. Like he was just forced to do it because he controls a foundation, has a presidential library. And I mean, that's the era we're in, where like we're just witnessing a complete credibility collapse for the entire establishment and for the empire as a whole. Because what are they actually going to do to stop this?
Well, it's interesting that you brought up those numbers, because I do want to show people this, because this was posted earlier today. Everybody check this out.
Benjamin Netanyahu, if you look at polling in the United States, he is lost in the court of public opinion. I want you to take a look here at his net favorable rating. It is the lowest on record, according to Gallup, and they have records going all the way back since the 1990s. What are we talking about here? Well, in April of 2019, before, obviously, Israel in Gaza and the latest war that's been going on for a long time, Benjamin Netanyahu was on the positive side at plus 13 points. Look at where he is today, minus 23 points. My goodness gracious. You look at those under the age of 35, his net favorable rating at this point, get this, 53 points underwater. My God. And this, of course, has everything to do with Israel's actions in Gaza, the American people at this particular point not exactly liking what they're seeing, and they believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is in large part responsible.
So I just want to add one part to this, Max, and then I'll go back to it. That is a sign that a lot of people are waking up. But I noticed something. It's always about Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Like when Bernie Sanders says Netanyahu and his right-wing government, what they're doing is wrong. It's always Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is disgusting. Don't get me wrong, but Netanyahu can be replaced with somebody else and they still move forward with the same strategy, because long story short, what they're not calling out is Zionism. They're not calling out the Zionist belief that this feeling that the land belongs to you. And so everybody else, the Palestinian people got to go. And I feel like just calling out Netanyahu is easy. That's the easy thing to do, but they're not calling out that belief system, right? So it's like you remove Benjamin Netanyahu. Does that remove Zionism? I would say no.
Yeah, it's a very liberal framework for understanding Israel. It's why I wrote that book, Goliath, just to shatter liberal Zionism by showing the full, comprehensive, holistic view of Jewish Israeli society from the inside, and to show that I started that book in 2009. Like that's when I got the idea for the project, when Benjamin Netanyahu came back into the prime minister's office, because I realized Israel had embarked on a kind of transition where the labor left Zionism of the past was completely dead, was never coming back. And Netanyahu, though he wasn't very religious himself, was going to preside over the transition to a permanent messianic, very openly ethno-supremacist future, where the violence and racism of Zionism was no longer concealed behind the mask of some kind of like socialist kibbutz, where they're constantly hoping for peace and blaming the Palestinians because they walk away from the greatest deal ever when the deal is just a sham. Like that was all gone. And it's important to look at the opposition to Netanyahu today to understand how comprehensively genocidal the Israeli polity is. I mean, you don't even have to understand the logic of Zionism or the history of Israel to just look at who the opposition figures are. Every single one of them supports the destruction of Gaza. Every single one of them supports annexing the West Bank. Every single one of them supports opposes a two-state solution, opposes a Palestinian state. And every single one of them cheered on, if not, or helped orchestrate the siege of Gaza, which has led to this point of famine. I mean, we're talking about Yoav Gallant, for example. We're talking about Avigdor Lieberman, who's a major opposition figure, who is actually, he publicly called for beheading Arab lawmakers in the Knesset with an axe. Yoav Gallant called Palestinians human animals. Naftali Bennett, he's probably going the most likely figure to replace Netanyahu, comes out of the Likud party, supports the settlements, was the head of a settler organization, although he didn't live in one. And he was one of the key authors of the Qana massacre in Lebanon in 1996 during Operation Grapes of Wrath, where a shelter of women and children was targeted by the Israelis with artillery. And he said, "I've killed a lot of Arabs in my life, and that is not a bad thing." These are beyond Netanyahu, Israel's only going to go further to the right and go deeper into messianic, genocidal apocalypticism. Look at the two figures holding his coalition together that have been driving the genocide, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. Those are cabinet ministers. So it's not just about Netanyahu, but Netanyahu is a symbol of all of this. And he's really Mr. Israel. He's the longest serving prime minister in history, longer than Ben-Gurion. He's also the most American seeming Israeli prime minister who's also able to represent a very nationalistic part of the Israeli public. But he's the propaganda king who grew up in the Philly suburbs. He went to MIT. He worked at Boston Consulting with Mitt Romney. He's very, very American. And so that has given him a certain appeal to Israelis who are obsessed with Hasbara, obsessed with propaganda. He can go to the Americans and be welcomed by Congress and communicate their position. There really isn't anyone else in Israeli politics who can do that very successfully. And so Israel's going, first of all, Netanyahu now symbolizes what Israel is. And so the hatred of Netanyahu and his negative numbers in the US signal a hatred, like a real hatred, a real visceral hatred of apartheid Israel. And there's no one who can really replace him. I mean, as bad as it might be for Netanyahu and his numbers now, the numbers are only going to get worse. And that's why I say like a terrible reckoning is coming for Israel. It doesn't matter what they do militarily, because as they routinely acknowledge, if it was actually Gideon Sa'ar, the Israeli foreign minister, who said this, that one suspension of arms by the US, just one, would lead to the extinction of Israel as a Jewish state. So once we have a political transformation in this country, Israel is going to be one of the first things to go.
This is important, I think, for people to hear. There's one more part here that they mentioned as well. Like, these younger voters are really making a difference here.
To that point, how do Americans feel about Israel's actions in Gaza right now?
Yeah, so let's take a look at this. I mean, net approval, Israel's military acts in Gaza. You go back to November of 2023, it's on the positive side of the ledger, plus 5 points. I bet if you even go back a little bit further, it'd be a little bit higher, but Gallup only measured in November of 2023 at plus 5 points. Look at here where we are in July of 2025. Way down there at minus 28 points. Among those under the age of 35, get this, a negative 73-point net approval rating. This is all being led. All the negative opinions towards Israel and their acts in Gaza are being led by the younger folks in the electorate. Negative 73 points on the net approval rating. You rarely ever see numbers that low, and that is charging up this number, 28 points underwater, the net approval rating of Israel's military acts in Gaza. The American people do not like what they're seeing and increasingly dislike what they're seeing.
That is
So that is really important for people to see. Things have definitely changed when you go back to 2023. And again, I know it is the younger people that give me a lot of hope, I would say. But I think that something that's really important that you also mentioned as well. You mentioned Randy Fine. This is another thing that just happened. Randy Fine is Congressman. Asal Rod posted, "How bad do you have to be for AIPAC to drop you?" So I don't know if everyone saw this, but AIPAC appears to drop endorsement of GOP lawmaker who called to starve away until hostages freed. Max, what are your thoughts? A little too extreme even for AIPAC, apparently?
Yeah, I hear Randy Fine, the Hebrew heifer, has also lost his endorsement from Cracker Barrel, which is particularly devastating to him. But yeah, did you see? I had a little dust up with Randy Fine in Congress. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw. That was my first time seeing all of Randy. Like, not trying to be mean, but that was my
me
first
too.
time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he was wearing clothes, but I saw all of them. But yeah, and I don't want to see any more. But I was surprised actually by his reaction. I thought, from his tendencies on Twitter, he's so aggressive and so openly hostile and casually genocidal that I thought my question would be more provocative to him and he'd be more eager for the confrontation. He ran away and he was very timid and weak, and he spoke in kind of a halting way. His voice he sounded like he'd never been put on the defensive before, which is a real sad commentary on our media. And, that really showed me that he's kind of a coward and kind of a grifter. I called him the Hebrew scammer to his face because when he came into this, it was sort of like a press event for backbencher Republican congressmen who were seeking to get more publicity, and they would meet with like online Con Inc. media. I saw him put on a kippah like before he came in. He was like, "I'm going to put on my kippah and I'm going to show that I'm like the most aggressive Jew in Congress. And that's going to be my image." And it was like, it's kind of like theatrical, like performative what he's doing. And what I think he thought he was doing was, just by being the most genocidal, he would get the most donations and get the most support from these very powerful Zionist groups. I mean, that's the way it works in Israel. In the Israeli Knesset, members of Knesset are always having a competition for who can be the most anti-Palestinian because it helps them get elected and reelected. They love it in Jewish Israeli society. But this is the U.S. We're witnessing a Holocaust, and it apparently embarrassed AIPAC. It hurt AIPAC's image because AIPAC was actually the first to give Randy Fine an endorsement when he ran for Congress, and they endorsed him more quickly than I think any other candidate before. So now they're rushing to unendorse him. And I do think this is a sign of the times, which is why, and as I said before, we're seeing AIPAC controlled, AIPAC endorsed Democrats like Wesley Bell actually issue mealy-mouthed, milquetoast statements about starvation, because that's actually the better move for AIPAC.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Marjorie Taylor Greene also called him out, by the way, because he wouldn't call it a genocide. This is recently. She's been more vocal than some of the Democrats on this issue, which is interesting. But she called him out, and she revealed to people that Randy Fine apparently didn't care about his district or his constituents. He just wanted to move to D.C.
Yep. Yeah, he wants to. I mean, he'd be fine just serving 2 years and then going and lobbying. That's what a lot of members of Congress do. They just like to be in there longer to build up stronger industry ties. You get a much better paycheck coming out of the revolving door if you were in there for like 25 years, like someone like Billy Tauzin from Louisiana, who spent his whole time just nurturing the interests of the pharmaceutical industry, then became the top lobbyist for Big Pharma. It's a great career. What's his name? The power broker from South Carolina, James Clyburn.
James Clyburn. Oh,
Clyburn. I mean, if he left Congress now, he would have any number of major lobbying jobs available to him because he's a complete industry tool. But that's also why Randy Fine is there. But he clearly thinks he'll be making money on, doing speaking tours for Zionist organizations. And there's a lot of money there. He'll be like, Michael Rappaport will be opening for him. But I wanted to make another quick point to a question you asked earlier, why they don't talk about Zionism when Netanyahu is being discussed. That's our job. And we've brought it, those of us in the independent alternative media have been winning the media war in a lot of ways. We are winning it because we came out early with our narratives and we supported them with facts, and we poked major holes in mainstream media, and people now see that what we warned about and said was true. And mainstream media is increasingly showing, corporate media is increasingly showing the American public what Palestinian journalists in Gaza have been wanting them to see, which is just the facts on the ground. And that's another reason why Netanyahu's approval ratings going down, why young people are turning against Israel. It's also just social media, the social media and independent media effect. So we're almost at the point where we're mainstreaming the reality of genocide, where Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling it genocide. Every major human rights group's calling it genocide. Israeli human rights groups like B'Tselem are calling it genocide. The New York Times features a genocide scholar, Omar Bartov, on its op-ed pages calling it a genocide, when 2 years ago he said, this is not a genocide, naughty, naughty. I think we helped move the Overton window, shift the Overton window. And the next thing we have to do is shift it so the media and normie society is forced to reckon with the reality of Zionism, to talk about Zionism. And we need to move from the one state, two state solution debate to the dismantling Zionism debate.
Yeah. Speaking of that, why do you think Bernie Sanders, why do you think he won't call out Zionism? Why do you think he's just focused on, why won't he call it a genocide? Why is Marjorie Taylor Greene now calling it a genocide, but Bernie Sanders still won't call it a genocide?
It's a great question. She loves to mess with the Democrats and especially the squad and lefty Democrats. I wonder if she did it just to increase pressure on Bernie. Because, look at what just happened with AOC, where she couldn't vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill to cut off military aid to Israel because it was her, and she called her a neo-Nazi. So I think we should leverage Marjorie Taylor Greene's genocide designation against Bernie and force him to call it what it is. He's calling for a cutoff in military aid, but he can't call it a genocide. Why is that? What does he have to lose? He's getting small donations. He's not like an AIPAC guy. So I think it just comes from Bernie's natural opposition to making it plain about Israel. This is a guy who back in 2014 was shouting at his constituents that Israel has a right to defend itself when it was initiating its genocidal pilot program. So I think this is just Bernie being lame.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.